It is my distinct pleasure to introduce someone who I admire tremendously. I spend a lot of time at banks and with central banks, and every once in a while you'll meet someone who really is a superstar when it comes to central banking. I'd like to introduce Rasheed Al Maraj, the governor of the central bank, someone who I admire to no end for his ability to create an environment to which innovation will happen. Governor. Fintech and what it represents makes your job easier, doesn't it?
To all of our guests coming from abroad and for all the participants. And I would like to thank Bank ABC and AFS for putting together again such a wonderful and exciting program. The efforts you have been doing, I think, has created a momentum. I'm pleased to say that since our last meeting here in Bahrain, it triggered a spark that caught a lot of attention from our local banking industry. I'm very grateful for these efforts and these initiatives, and I can assure you that the Central Bank of Bahrain will stand behind these kind of efforts because we believe that the way forward for the banking industry is through this global new environment. Coming back to your question, regulator usually try to play it safe. Historically, we want to keep banking as boring as possible because we don't like any disturbances that create financial crisis and then triggered some economic setbacks. But now we live in a different world. Technology has brought to us great things with certain risks. And I think my job and my team's job at the central bank and other regulator is to ensure that we embrace this change and we provide the risk mitigators in order to ensure that, first of all, that all these services are offered because the markets wants them. Second, all the conventional concerns from the central banks point of view regarding consumer protection, regarding procedures and regulations when it comes to anti-money laundering and combating terrorist financing are in place. So beyond that, I think we are ready to entertain any kind of ideas. So I don't think fintech gives me a more sleepless night than worrying about the financial crisis and the impact that we had to go through over the last 10 years.
Do you think that fintech will create more synergies between the central banks across the region?
I cannot say for sure, no, this new phenomenon is going to give us any kind of clear directions. Because, as Sahil indicated earlier, we are in a very unpredictable environment. What matters for us is we have to be ready for this change. And the most important thing, I think, we have to create the mindset shift so that we embrace this change, we provide the right environment for this to operate, and we become an enabler rather than a barrier for this new technologies. Because it's coming, it's beyond borders, and whether we like it or not, in Bahrain, for instance, there are thousands and thousands of people who have accounts outside Bahrain and dealing through Apple Pay or PayPal or all these type of activities that beyond our control. And we cannot say, this is something that we don't want to happen, but what we want to see, that our banks in Bahrain and other financial services will be able to offer alternative means of payments for these people.
One of the central themes of the bank, of the central bank, is to protect consumers. And if we look at the experimentation that's happening in the fintech industry, if we look at the cyber currencies, for example, there really isn't any clear mechanisms yet to protect people, from adverse effects that occur. I mean, what are your thoughts on how?
I mean, that's why we have to keep an open mind about it, and we send our people to different places to learn about this. We get engaged with other regulators that have passed through this experience. So we are in a learning journey for this. This is a new thing. As I said earlier, the most dangerous thing for us to do as a regulator is to keep a blind eye about this development and say, this is something that is still at the initial stage and we are not going to take any risk by embracing that. In Bahrain, we said from day one, we will keep an open mind and we will be open to any new ideas that will, first of all, there is 3 criteria that I have said and we have debated internally with my team. This will have to meet all the requirements regarding anti-money laundering. This will also protect consumers when it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to identity, etc., and confidentiality. And it will bring value to the economy. I mean, these 3 criteria, if we can meet them, I don't see other why we don't allow any services to operate in Bahrain.
And do you see in this particular market the development of more collaboration between the fintechs and the banks themselves and the central bank?
I can speak about Bahrain. We were a slow starter on this. That's why I was very pleased to see AFS and Bank ABC took the initiatives last year and started this conference. And this year also it's becoming a bigger and more attention. And I see more of my colleagues from the banks in Bahrain are present here. It triggers an interest. And I think the banks, with our own encouragements and with the debates that we have been having lately, are getting excited into jumping into this. And in the wider circles, there are also interest from individuals and companies who are joining our regulatory sandbox that we started last year. And I think this will create a momentum, and hopefully this will yield better results for Bahrain at large.
In fact, I read about your sandbox. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
We started this middle of last year, and then we complemented it with setting up a unit within the central bank for fintech. Since then, there is about 7 or 8 applicants that are starting on this regulatory sandbox. And we are still looking into more applicants joining the regulatory sandbox. The sandbox has certain conditions. We would like to use this as an experimentation for us to learn more about this industry and how we can put in place the right checks and balances. And at the same time, we work with the industry and learn from them what are the things that will make them succeed. The idea is to ensure that graduation from the sandbox to the real economy in a reasonable way, and that will hopefully bring about, as I said, the good value for the economy of Bahrain.
The sandboxes that have been set up in places like Singapore, Malaysia, and Hong Kong, one thing that really impressed me was the sheer number of young people who were involved in that. And if I look across the Middle East, over 50% of the population is under age 25. So I think there's an environment there which is unique in the world for this large amount of human capital that's under age 25 to really do things. I mean, what are your thoughts on how the sandbox can be used to amplify the young people of the region, and how it can be used for financial inclusion?
Look, the way I see things, and this is shared vision within the central bank, is it's our duty to put the infrastructure for the future. It is not good enough for us that we just maintain certain level of financial stability and we think the banks is doing fine and that's it. We look at it from a different perspective. Exactly what you are saying. We should work for the future. The future is going to be different. The expectation and the inspiration and the energy that we see within our young people should be harnessed in order to meet their expectation for the future. And if we don't provide the right environments for the future to happen, I think we will fail in our duty, not only as a regulator, but as a member of the public institutions. We have a responsibility not to look in a very narrow vision, not in a tunnel vision. We have to look in a wider vision. Our role in Bahrain, we may have to play an unconventional role as a regulator because the financial services is the second largest sector in Bahrain. And historically, this sector has played a critical role in the development of Bahrain. If there is any sector that can have a leverage to the economy of Bahrain, it's only the financial services sector. And I think because of the availability of the manpower, the financial resources, we have to ensure that and help the financial services build the infrastructure for the future. I want my fellow citizen, the young generation in Bahrain, to feel that, as they move into the labor markets and they find the right environments for them to operate, to meet their expectation and to fulfill their satisfaction toward change. It is no good for me to play it safe.
One thing that we forget as bankers is that banking, unlike any other industry within a nation, provides social financial cohesion. We're the glue that holds society together. Now, as we look at fintechs coming into the banking sector, we think of it as a disruptive force, but actually it seems more of an enabling force where it expands our infrastructure to do things we couldn't anticipate 10 years ago. And I think the young people of today have a different attitude towards using the financial infrastructure than our generation does. I mean, if you look at their behaviors with payments and the way they save and spend, it's very different than that. And what I'm wondering is, in the Eastern markets, when we have these sandboxes, we do have a number of experiments that fail, and what they've learned in the Eastern markets is that they want to reward failure because they've learned how not to do something. They feel that's as important. How do you feel about that sort of social attitude here in the region?
I think experience is learned by, or got is by failing. You have to look beyond this winning game for this to make it meaningful for the country. We have to look beyond the individual experience and use it as collective movements and initiatives in order to embrace and plant the right blocks into this big jigsaw. We are starting now with this. We are still at the early stage. I cannot say for sure what will succeed and what will not, but we are keeping an open mind. We are encouraging every idea to come and test it within this regulatory sandbox. And we hope that, we will get some success, and this will hopefully graduate into being fully licensed company and will become an example for others to follow suit. I hope people do not look at these initiatives from the point of view of dollar and cents only.
Did you foresee the issuance of sort of hybrid licenses that may not be full banking licenses? They will have sort of a different composition?
We have started long before this regulatory sandbox. We have licensed around 16 companies that operate within card processing and and payment services. And some of them have made some good inroads in their activities. But now with this new experience that we have with the regulatory sandbox, obviously if somebody graduates from this regulatory sandbox, they will be fully licensed as a member of our financial service community, and they will operate under the same umbrella that the rule book requires.
And do you see banks in Bahrain expanding to other markets and how that relationship will work?
The domestic banks, I don't think they have the capacity yet to be an active player on the regional level. But we have the wholesale sector, which is predominantly regional banks like ABC, GIB, and the others who have been very active on the regional and the global sense. Our banks in Bahrain are still very domestically focused. Most of them are very small. The central bank over the last period have been encouraging mergers between banks, and we will continue with this policy because we believe in order to become an active player regionally, we have to have sizable banks in Bahrain that will have their major attention to Bahrain market, but they become a player on the regional scene.
Discussion we had yesterday, we talked a little bit about Bitcoin and blockchain and the cyber currencies, and I know that some regulators in different markets have come out with very strong opinions, on these technologies. With 1,383 cyber currencies that have been issued as of last night, it seems like there'll be a number of those to which investors will ultimately not receive the kind of return that they're expecting. How do you feel about that as an asset class, within the financial system here?
Look, there is a lot of interest in Bitcoins and this cryptocurrencies because of the speculative nature of them. And for that, we will not be a participant nor encouragement to give any kind of encouragement to people to play that game. We think, still there is some concern about type of activities. We are not going to disallow it as an investment activities and asset class, as you rightly said, but as a form of payments and currency. We have a legal issue now because domestically, our law does not allow this type of activities to operate in Bahrain. But we, at the same time, have allowed Bitcoin's initiatives on the regulatory sandbox. We will see what happens, what kind of offering they will have to the public, and we take it from there. And we are trying to understand what other regulators is doing in this aspect. Simultaneously, we are looking at digital currencies, and we see what digital currencies can help in facilitating transaction costs and payments locally. That's why we are studying and familiarizing ourselves with different central banks' activities on this, because we think the advancement of technology will make it imperative for all central banks to start introducing some form of digital currency locally.
You make a very important distinction between cyber currencies and digital currencies. And if I look at markets where cyber currencies have had problems, it's not the technology of the encryption of the currency that's the problem, it's the exchange to which they operate has problems. And I think we're just at the point now where we're emerging from this infancy of these types of currencies into now looking more at the practical side of it, and how do we create the exchanges that are much more robust? Because the encryption of the currency is pretty secure, but the the entire ecosystem that it operates in, it seems like the Wild West almost.
Well, I think, the recent incidents that took place in Tokyo where the exchange was hacked and certain money was siphoned out anonymously, this also creates a concern for us, If all these transactions are supported by this distributed ledger blockchain, one could have expected, all these transactions can be traced. But this incident, I think, highlighted our concerns about the security and the robustness of checks and balances within these exchanges. We have to be in guard on these things. I mean, it cannot be left blindly that, these are cryptocurrencies that are supported by well-tested technology. But you have incidents that makes you wonder, whether there is an arrangement that makes you comfortable about it.
I think you said something there that really kind of triggered something in my mind. If blockchain is simply a ledger of custody, and we know who the ownership of that particular component is at any one time, if a cyber currency is stolen, we should be able to find it.
Right.
We should be able to have a ledger of all the stolen ones that are no longer valid.
Right.
But that seems that hasn't really emerged yet.
That's exactly my point. You just cannot take it for granted. All these arrangements are in place and the technology is there. But when you have incidents like this, things disappear in thin air. I mean, it's incomprehensible. I mean, similarly, you had incidents that you hear from time to time, like, the Central Bank of Bangladesh, where there was money taken out by anonymous people. So you have to be on guard. You have to put in place all the tests and all the controls in order to make sure that nothing is left, because at the end of the day, the central banks, any central banks, their responsibility is to protect the public's interest and consumer protection and confidentiality of the information is key in our business.
One final question. People ask you all the time about what are the challenges that the fintech represents for central bankers. I'd like to turn it around the other way. What do you see as an opportunity?
It is an opportunity. I mean, we see it in terms of bringing in new technology that will facilitate and will cut the cost of transactions, will make it accessible to wider customers, the unbanked that were left behind, and countries that, makes it very difficult for them to find suitable banking services. I think we have to look at the African experience in Kenya and other sub-Saharans. It has done wonders to the people there. And I think that's the beauty of this fintech. And that's why in Bahrain, we at the central bank are very excited about it. And we think, this is probably the next thing for our development as a financial services in Bahrain.
Thank you for sharing your insight on what's happening there. And I also would like to take this opportunity to congratulate you on the award that you received from the Banker magazine. I hope the audience will join me in thanking you for spending time with us this morning.
Thank you.